Wouldn't it be nice to have several thought leaders in your industry know and love your brand? Start a podcast. Invite your industry's thought leaders to be guests on your show and start reaping the benefits of having a network full of industry influencers. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles, Director of Partnerships here at Sweetfish Media. I am joined today by Mike McEuen. He is the Director of Marketing at Mixmax. Mike, how you doing today, man?
Excellent, Logan. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I am really excited to have you share on a hot topic, one that we have covered here on the show before. A lot of people are talking about sales and marketing alignment. You know, it's 2019 and no one still has mastered sales and marketing alignment. So I think it's great that we're talking about it again today, and excited to hear your unique perspective about how we can drive alignment through shared goals. Before we get straight into that, Mike, I would love for you to share with listeners a little bit about your background in marketing and what you and the team at Mixmax are up to these days.
Awesome. So a little bit about myself. I've been in the industry 10 plus years. I came up on the advertising side, really from an agency lens. And then most recently, about the last 5 or 6 years, I've been in-house, really having a lot of fun in the B2B space, advertising and trying to acquire new customers for SaaS, and working very closely with sales teams to do that on the go-to-market strategy. And some exciting things that are new in Mixmax, and just to give you a little brief synopsis of Mixmax. So Mixmax is twofold. First is enhancing your communications. So if you look at an email today, it's really just text-based, and we've been that way for a very long time. And really, if you think about it, it's HTML, much like a web page. And so what we want to do is allow anyone to mark up their email like movable ink. And so you can add things like your calendar or rich media and make it very attractive and more engaging to your customers and have better conversations. And then the second part is on workflow automation. So on the back end, when things happen, like someone signs your DocuSign, we can go back in Salesforce, update the records, send an email to your CS team telling them they need to follow up and schedule a call, and ping your boss on Slack. And so that's really what we've been hard at work on the Mixmax end, is allowing reps and allowing all customer-facing teams to never leave their inbox and do everything day to day and have better conversations with their customers.
I love that, man. We're all in our inboxes all day long, whether we're sales, marketing, customer success. So the more that we can make our inbox work for us, then I am all about anything there, especially as kind of a workflow nerd who used to sell, workflow automation software in a previous life. I love kind of tinkering with where can we kind of save some time here and kick this off and those sorts of things. So I love the stuff that you guys are doing, Mike. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, how should marketing align their budgets and their goals to sales? Tell me a little bit about how you think about that, maybe what you guys are doing between marketing and sales there at Mixmax.
Yeah, I think let's take a step back. You just look I'm talking specifically to the B2B space, but I think things got overcomplicated on the marketing side. We really went too heavy on the brand side because we couldn't really track that much back in the day. Now you're having a lot of our systems start to talk to one another, and you can pull in your CRM and start to understand how marketing campaigns are performing. And really taking a step back, marketing is sales. And that's what I think I really want to hark on to the marketing folks as well, is marketing is just sales. It's one to many, where sales is really a one-to-one conversation. But at the end of the day, the reason that we're all going to get more budgets or more headcount is going to be based on actual revenue, realized revenue. So I think aligning yourself to sales and better understanding what are their targets and how can you best impact them is where you need to start as a marketer, instead of kind of going to your terms, which we really talk about things like web conversions and leads, and that's often too far up the funnel.
Yeah. Yeah. So you are very much a proponent of backing out of your revenue targets into actionable goals. So reverse engineering from that end game of, as you said, realized revenue, right?
Exactly. And to give you some perspective on that, it's very similar to like a sales manager going with an individual sales rep and trying to help establish some targets for them. And so what that is like looking at, okay, with my sales team, how are they comprised? Do you have an inside sales team, an outside sales team? So someone who's like working the leads coming in, or a team that's really just hungry and aggressive and going outbound. And then from there, you're going to kind of earmark what marketing can help. So let's say, for example, with the inside sales team, they may have an overall revenue target. They have a quota. And so what you do is you take that quota and you start backing it out. So what is the average deal size that they typically have for that? And that will give you a sense of the deals needed to get there. And then you can, based on their close rate, then you know how many opportunities it will take for them to get towards that number. And then you can have a really good conversation with that head of sales and saying, okay, I want to align with you guys. If you need 200 total opportunities, let's just say, for example, how much should marketing support there? And usually the number, maybe is around 30%, 40% of those being sourced from marketing. And then you can go back to your numbers and back to your channels and better understand, okay, how many leads is this going to take? Historically, what was my cost per lead? And you can start backing it all the way to your budget. But I think a lot of times marketers will start with just a kind of a blanket budget. They'll look at some of their channels and they'll try to figure it out. But the best way to do is start backwards and move forward. So before you start thinking about where you're going to advertise or if you're going to do events or not, you really need to at the root of it, better understand how is sales going to be impacted. So how many total opportunities do you need to get to them for them to hit their numbers? And then start thinking about your channel mix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what I hear you saying, Mike, it really kind of echoes what Andrea Kale from here just a few episodes ago was talking about. She was sharing about the difference between a bottoms up and a top down approach to your marketing budget. And so it sounds like you're in line with what she was talking about in taking that top down approach, as opposed to saying, hey, here's our marketing budget. What can we get out of it? You're saying, okay, here's what we need to hit. And let's work backwards from there to see what we need to spend, what we need to allocate in order to get there, because then we're kind of working within these walls and we've got to get creative to try and get to that number based on, what sales is looking for from us, right?
Exactly. And when you really think about performance marketing, you have to go that route, because what usually happens during those discussions is you figure out maybe an arbitrary number that you thought marketing would influence or bring in, or even if you already had earmarked budget certain places, you may find that you don't have enough budget or that you need to be a lot more strategic. And so some of maybe the bigger brand plays you need to rein in more, or you really just need to get very scrappy. And so I think it puts a realistic idea and a sense of things in your head where you need to get to. And then you can have those uncomfortable conversations up front of asking for more budget if you need it. You say, hey, just based on things alone, we either need to get really much better at closing, and maybe I need to do some great product marketing to help our troops on the ground, or we need to be realistic in if we really want to hit this target and this growth, we're going to need X amount of extra budget. And so instead of just putting an arbitrary number of budget out there and then starting to chop it up, it's having that conversation up front and setting those expectations of, okay, here we are with the state of things today. Here's how we could realistically get there. Do we have the right resources and do we have the right budget?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see how this approach actually makes that uncomfortable conversation of asking for more budget a little bit easier, because you're not saying, hey, can we have this because I think we can produce this. You've already backed into that number and saying, this is why I'm asking for this. So it's much more of a sequential, a linear conversation of I'm asking for X because of Y. Do you think that mentality also helps with this idea that you mentioned you wanted to harp on a little bit of, marketing being sales, having that same sort of mindset as a sales manager, kind of backing into, their quota and the activity numbers that then they're going to expect from the individual contributors on their sales team?
100%. I think, as an individual, we're always kind of like a nervous wreck, especially with digital marketing. We have technology thrown at us. There's a lot of levers coming on, and it really takes the emotion out of things. And the higher you go up the executive chain, the more you realize it's really just a numbers game. It's a lot of just Excel formulas to get where you need to go. And so what that helps to do is in a mathematical model, it helps to show your CEO or the executive team what is realistic with what they initially thought, and it can change assumptions. And you do it in a way that's very analytical, instead of coming to the table and having this kind of emotional buildup when it's too late and you're almost to your quarter's end and you didn't have enough budget or you didn't earmark it the right way. Then it becomes a lot more emotional, and that doesn't play well on the executive side. So the more you can kind of think mathematically, the more in alignment and lockstep you're going to be with that head of sales.
Yeah, I love that. So the next thing I know you wanted to touch on, Mike, is, so we've talked about aligning with shared goals, thinking about, that realized revenue the same way between marketing and sales. And there's this question of how then do you build a growth obsessed culture? How do you facilitate that? I know that's something that you're passionate about and that you wanted to share on as well. And I think that adds to the conversation here really well in talking about, how do we get on the same page? We can talk about it mathematically. Tell me some of the things that you see there from a culture perspective that you can drive alignment between sales and marketing as well.
I think it's thinking very strategic. And so I've come in the past, if you think of marketing and sales as two complete different divisions, a lot of people even treat them almost like two different separate companies. So they really don't talk that often, and maybe like once a month they'll review, okay, marketing generated this many leads, sales closed this many opportunities. I find it much better to be a growth obsessed culture when you start thinking holistically together. Okay, here's our general pool of our team, our go-to-market team, and how can we best allocate resources, and start thinking together in terms of campaigns, holistic campaigns together. And so really that comes down to everyone kind of knowing the vision. So everybody sells, everybody markets. And so what I mean by that is marketing is really understanding what sales is doing on the ground floor, understanding where they're getting pushback or having a hard time closing the deal, creating great content around that, and then sales pushing out that content. So you're working very closely in tangent together. And so when things come out like product releases, you can get the most bang for your buck. So instead of marketing doing something completely separate, you are really thinking in terms of almost like a sprint. So marketing sales comes together, say, okay, we have this we're trying to get into these accounts. We have these campaigns that we think that we're going to do it. Here's the right content after speaking to sales and speaking to customers. Let's walk this out together. We're going to go and we're going to get this on certain publications. We're going to advertise, but it's going to be where your target audience is. And then we need your help when you're having these conversations to use these pieces of content to help kind of accelerate the deal. And so you're really thinking strategically together in kind of a lockstep motion where you're speaking the same language, you're pushing out the same content. You're going to get the most bang for your buck versus two different departments doing two different things and expecting different outcomes.
Today's growth story revolves around search engine marketing. Delphix, a big data platform, had hired an agency to manage their Google ads a few years ago, but they weren't seeing the results they wanted to see. Being such a technical B2B solution, they set out to find a team that could take on their challenge. After countless proposals, they found the perfect fit. Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency. In just 1 week after launching Directive's campaigns, Delphix saw their lead volume double and their cost per lead drop by 60%. I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 there, the exponential value of being on the same page, especially with, those pivotal times like new product releases or around an event or, whatever the case may be. I think that's a great reminder for this year for sales and marketing folks. One of the last things I know you wanted to share on too, Mike, was creating consistent reviews for top opportunities and overall leads. So, within your team, are you doing some account-based marketing where you're looking at how to support the sales team with some of their top opportunities, late stage sort of stuff? Or tell us a little bit about what you see the opportunity there for greater alignment in this area.
So I think we kind of think about account-based in a few different lenses. So we have like our enterprise team who really deals with some of the top growth in the Fortune 5,000 companies in the United States. Mm-hmm. And because of that higher ticket amounts, you can spend a lot more time in that. And there's a lot more decision making that happens, longer sales cycles. And so it's much more than just marketing bringing in that initial lead. Because if it's 7 to 10 decision makers in the average kind of B2B sell process, right, you need to reach and influence all of those. So if the sales reps are working as hard as they can, to get a champion, and maybe they're talking to 3 members of that team, marketing needs to come in with cover fire and help reach the additional members and get them all engaged. If nothing else, just know who that brand is. So when the champion comes through and they talk about your solution, everybody in that room has at least heard of your brand, understands to some degree what that solution is, and help that sales rep who's like really trying their hardest to carve into that account, get them in there faster and get the deal closed and accelerated. So I think that's where you see like the true account base where we'll sit and we'll pick apart, let's say 200 accounts, we'll map them to everybody on, the different functions and the job titles that you're going to speak with and go after them. So whether it's producing the right content and letting the sales rep go through there, so better decks, better collateral to each individual member, or targeted advertising where we're going after those exact individuals, showing them things like video and getting them better aware of our solution. It's more almost vertical based because with our lower price point, other than the enterprise, we have to go after thousands of potential accounts, and so that's really building kind of a fit score where you can get thousands of accounts based on things like vertical, company size, the technologies they use, and you can do it more in mass. And so we do that a little bit more programmatic, but it's still very methodical how we choose things. But those are quicker wins, less people in that decision-making cycle, but still a very honed-in process where we're not just, your typical inbound is put a bunch of content out there, see who comes in, and filter it through. And we found that's just not always the most efficient. Inbound is great, but targeted inbound is way better. Targeted outbound is way better.
Yeah, and on point there, as far as the topic for today's interview, talking about sales and marketing alignment, I imagine that as you're doing more late stage stuff and more strategic support on the top accounts that sales is trying to break into and trying to close deals with, then there's more of that feeling of camaraderie. To take your analogy of the air cover or the fire cover that you're providing to sales as they're there on the front lines, that shared experience and that camaraderie of working through those deals and going back to marketing at late stage in deal cycles likely is going to breed a different sort of culture than, hey, marketing's over here, sales over here. We're almost different companies. So I absolutely love that. It's hard to think about, but we're almost a month into 2019. So other marketers out there who maybe started out with a New Year's resolution of driving more alignment between their team and their sales teams, or sales leaders that are looking to do either, or anyone who's thinking about sales and marketing alignment and trying to drive that to a better place than it was last year. What's any final thoughts or advice you would give to folks as they're trying to get incrementally better this year with sales and marketing alignment throughout their organization?
I think you just have to bite the bullet as a marketer and actually sit with sales, which is really scary at first because you are exposing your numbers and all the messiness going on with your MarTech stack and even areas you're just unsure of, but it will work out better in the long run and selfishly make your programs work better. So for example, Traditionally, maybe we would just get some new inquiries coming in, and they would go through more of like an automated drip. There's nothing wrong with that. You have to do that at scale. But a lot of times being very close with things like your inside SDRs, your outside SDRs will actually benefit your program. So for example, where my automated message may just get lost in the clutter of things and it's not very tailored, I actually have SDRs that I'm working very closely with, giving them understanding of, okay, this is how this person came in here. Here's the campaign they came with. Here's the content they saw. Here's what they're interested in. They're having very personal conversations with those leads that are coming in. In addition to that, they're more persistent, and they can get in things with, like, they can send the prospect video. So where I was maybe getting a lower digit conversion rate because everything's kind of automated, I have like a really smart, sharp SDR team who are working with me, and as soon as those leads are coming in, they are having more personalized conversations. And so they'll chop up a template. They'll go and look at the person's profile, and they'll add great information. If they don't follow up right away, they'll make them a custom video from Vidyard. And we've seen a much better impact and a better bottom line for me, selfishly, by being able to talk with the SDR team. So I think really it's more about marketing, walking over to sales, better understanding what they're going through, but more importantly, helping sales to understand what's going on the marketing side, where a lot of times we are a black box, or we just do big, shiny brand things, and helping understand, okay, this is why I was thinking about putting money here. Here's how it's coming through. Here's the good and the bad. And then working with them, you're going to get a better impact overall from your dollar.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, I think that is great advice for folks. Invest in the relationship between marketing and sales, invest the time, invest the vulnerability, share what's going on, the good and the bad and the ugly. Sales leaders and marketing leaders alike, none of us have it perfect. There are messy things in our tech stack, in execution, but the more that we create that environment of talking to each other and hearing out how we can help each other, I think then the more successful we're going to be at driving sales and marketing alignment, the ever elusive goal as it seems to be. So on that note, Mike, thank you for sharing your thoughts on this subject. I think it's going to be super valuable for listeners. If anybody listening to this would like to stay connected with you, learn more about Mixmax, or ask you any follow-up questions, what's the best way for them to find you, man?
So on Twitter, you can find me at Lonohead, Lonohead. I know that's very odd. I love my dog so much. It's kind of there. You can follow us, interact with us. We're very active on social at Mixmax, or find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat and talk to other smart sales and marketing folks.
I love it, man. Mike, thanks again for being on the show, man.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. All those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.